this symbol. This symbol that's on the screen. Now, what comes to your mind? I think a lot of people will say yin-yang, right? Well, we actually see it all throughout nature. You can see there's a galaxy, there's a hurricane, you can see a sunflower. And on the left side, you'll see actually the first known use of the yin-yang symbol, at least historically. You can see seashells basically follow the same principle as well. This is actually called the taijutsu, okay? And it's known as the yin-yang or Tao symbol, the taijutsu. Okay, so there it is. You have a white part and a black part. You have a light part and a dark part. Okay, so let's look at just the circle, the taijutsu circle. The circle represents all of creation. A circle is never ending. It has no beginning or end. It is a perfect shape as it has no corners, rough edges, angles, or irregularities. Thus, it represents God or creation itself, the all that is. And this is typical for the use of a circle in symbolism. Now, if we look at the swirls of the taijutsu, the two swirls represent change, of which all creation is comprised. All that exists is in a constant state of change. All matter passes from form to form in an endless dance of creation. Life itself is change. Inability to change is the equivalent of death and non-existence. Therefore, the two swirls inside the circle represent this ever-changing dance of matter taking place within the whole of creation. The two dots within each swirl represents the idea that no matter how deeply into one polarity or the other we may travel, the seed of the opposite energy is always carried within each polarity, no matter if each is at its strongest. So say you look at the yin-yang symbol and these swirls. Let's say the white part becomes bigger than the black part. Well, you have an extreme taking place. The yang is taking over the yin, essentially. Well, there's still that seed of the black inside of that white, and that seed is going to then reconcile. It's going to bring the darkness out of the light. And the same would happen if the darkness were overtaking the light. There's the seed of the light within it. So you see there's this ever constant change of yin to yang or yang to yin. And this is what this is representing. Okay? The seed is in each, an ever-changing dance of matter. So yin and yang represents fish with eyes. Yin becomes yang, yang becomes yin, the time or place of cooperation or competition. Right and wrong works together, and difference and change is natural. There is beauty in symbolism for simplicity upon complex understandings as this, right? It's putting it into a symbol, as simple as the polarity, the paradox of all of life, of all the many different things that contrast with each other, all put into one symbol. And actually, this photo I have here in this slide is from Avatar: The Last Airbender. You can see there are two fish swimming, in a circle. So that's actually in the very first episode, I'm pretty sure, of the Avatar: The Last Airbender series, one of my favorite TV shows you might be familiar with, and it's very brief on screen. You may not even notice it, but it's a slight little touch, which is quite funny. So just bear in mind, change is essentially law. Everything is bound to this law of change, the yin and yang. So we are seeing opposites. From chapter 2 of the Tao Te Ching, quote, "When people see things as beautiful, ugliness is created. When people see things as good, evil is created. Being and non-being produce each other. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short define each other. High and low oppose each other. Fore and aft follow each other." End quote. Okay, so that's basically just summarizing this concept of yin and yang through just one of the quotes from Lao Tzu of the Tao Te Ching. And so if you look at the yin-yang symbol, it actually represents consciousness. This is, of course, a chart from Mark Passio, markpassio.com, or whatonearthishappening.com. And you see that he's looking at the yang, which is this white part of the taijutsu, And that represents the solar, the masculine, active, analytical, dominant, left brain or aggressive state, the active state. And then you have the yin, which is the dark side of this little Taiji 2 symbol. And it's lunar, feminine, passive, intuitive, submissive, right brain, and compassionate. So this symbol really combines many aspects of our reality and brings them together to create a balance. And funny enough, there's actually a word called Enantiodromia, which is a Greek word that means opposite, running course. And it is a principle introduced in the West by psychiatrist Carl Jung. In Psychological Types, Jung defines enantiodromia as the emergence of the unconscious opposite in the course of time. It is similar to the principle of equilibrium in the natural world, in that any extreme is opposed by the system in order to restore balance. When things get to their extreme, they turn into their opposite. Jung adds that this characteristic phenomenon practically always occurs when an extreme, one-sided tendency dominates conscious life. In time, an equally powerful counterposition is built up which first inhibits the conscious performance and subsequently breaks through the conscious control. However, in Jungian terms, a thing psychically transmogrifies into its shadow opposite in the repression of psychic forces that are thereby cathected into something powerful and threatening. So, of course, Carl Jung, he's known as a famous psychiatrist in the West particularly, and he talks about so many great ideas we'll be talking about in this presentation, one of them being enantiodromia, but it basically is representing this yin-yang structure. You can even see an image at the bottom that sums it up simply as the changing of something into its opposite. That's really all he's saying here. He's just putting it in some psychiatrist words and terminology. And again, it's just recognizing a principle inherent within the universe. And Hermetic principles have also been discovered and talked about, especially much in the modern day, which is to basically go back to a lot of the occult teachings of the Egyptians and Hermetic philosophy. You can see there's a book called The Kabbalion by 3 initiates where they talk about different principles in the universe. Some people will call it natural laws. You have mentality, correspondence, vibration, polarity, which is particularly our focus here for this symbol, Taiji 2. And then we have gender, rhythm, and cause and effect, but they're all present. I mean, you can look at correspondence and you see the symbol is like a circle that's empty, and then there's a circle that's whole. And you see how they're basically connected to one another. These all are interplayed into each other at the same time. So very important just to know about how each one of these principles may relate to each other and how they may be applied to your own life as well. How a ruler is typically reflected of the people who are being ruled, and vice versa in the case of correspondence. Or vibration, when we look at anything under a microscope and we see everything's constantly moving, we can actually say, wow, this ancient knowledge holds up quite true. And so we see that we're revisiting a lot of what the ancients told us, and not everything necessarily we can say they were true about, or maybe we need to have more perspective on. We need to nonetheless learn from what was said. This balance that we're talking about between the yin and yang also reminds me of just general brain balance. This is a chart by Chris Nelson of evolveconsciousness.org. And you can see you have the left brain, extreme on one end, and then the right brain extreme on the other end. And then you have this zone of balance where there's no longer an extreme imbalance, and you have this center, okay? And it's ideal but unreachable permanently. So it's only passing contact and fluctuation. Think of it like a straight line, and we're like this. We're trying to align to the line, but we can never get it just perfect. Our goal is just trying to line up with that line, aligning to nature, some people will say. So I encourage that you read through this chart for yourself if you want to have a little bit more perspective on brain balance. You don't have to agree entirely with this science, but it's another way of looking at the yin and yang. Okay, people have even applied it to business. Here's a chart about the Tao of business success. You have somebody saying here's the yin, passive, accepting side, and the yang, active and aggressive side. And it's like the yin is the outside in and the yang is the inside out. So you can really apply this principle, this understanding, this symbol to anything in life. Shall you put your mind to it? You have to realize that essentially the yin and yang is in everything. Quote, all information whatsoever can be translated into terms of yang and yin. That's Alan Watts. And we'll be using a lot of quotes from him in this presentation. An example would be attraction and repulsion, life and death, winter and summer. A bee is using yang to pollinate a yin flower, yet the bee contains both yin and yang. The atom has a positively charged core surrounded by negatively charged electrons. The binary code also demonstrates this through 0 and 1 patterns, and no movement is possible unless an opposite movement occurred before it, in the case of walking. Okay, and then you have Wu Wei, Taoist practice, and that is essentially the balance between yin and yang. We'll be talking about that. But the possibility of order turning into chaos or chaos turning into order is always present because you have this constant shift between the yin and the yang. So we need to utilize Wu Wei and Taoist practice to help us understand how we can become more balanced within our own life.